Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to ioRadio with your host, Adam Smith. Today, I decided I was going to do a short episode going over a particular conference that was at the Bitcoin 2025 convention. As many of you may know, I produce what I call a truth remix of the Bitcoin convention. I've been doing it for the last 3 years, and now I'm working on the current one, 2025. So I've been poring over all the footage, looking for interesting things, trying to kind of distill the conference down into a short little video that can show you segments of what people were saying, intermingled and rearranged in such a way that I kind of make it a little bit more truthful than what it really was. But this time, I came across one particular panel that is almost worth watching in its entirety because, as far as I know, based on what I've seen in the past, this is the first time they've actually let a legit crypto critic on stage during the convention, and the results are pretty interesting. So I'm just gonna run this, and we're gonna react to this. Which is Peter Schiff, which is a known Goldbug, a guy that's hawking gold. So he is notorious for hating crypto because basically crypto takes away a lot of the investment money that he thinks should go towards gold. Now, I'm not a fan of gold as an investment either. I think it's a speculative commodity like Bitcoin, but I think Bitcoin is basically a Ponzi scheme, whereas gold is just a poor choice of an investment because it creates no value. Bitcoin creates no value, but it also has a lot of detriment. But anyway, this is a great example of, how somebody you don't necessarily agree with can also have a lot of interesting things to say. And the fact that he's managed to get some attention and some space at this convention is pretty interesting. So let's go ahead and watch this segment, and I'm going to stop it and we'll be talking about it. So this is Peter Schiff with another guy, and this other guy is completely insufferable. I don't even remember his name, but let's just pick up this conference. It's a short conference, less than a half an hour.
Let's start with what we all have in common. We are sound money advocates.
Sound money advocates. Yeah.
Right?
That's
we
a
all
little
like
begging
to warn
question.
people about this destruction that comes from fiat debasement, but we've
Another
taken
talking
different
point.
sides when it comes to Bitcoin. So first, I would just love to get both of your takes because you have seen the sound money movement evolve over the decades.
All right, so right away, there's a lot of begging the question fallacies that Bitcoin is sound money and that fiat debasement. These are the standard fear-mongering or arbitrary claims and fear-mongering talking points. Inflation's going to destroy everything, therefore you got to buy Bitcoin. I'm not going to go into that, but it's just, the same boring stuff. Natalie here, she is like, she's a cute girl, one of the few girls that's in crypto, so she's managed to parlay this into a greater amount of participation every year in the convention. And, she's an anomaly, a woman in crypto. So, and she's apparently quite the shill, as you'll see here. She's almost threatened by Peter's presence on the stage, and she cuts him off on occasion.
Trace, you embraced Bitcoin as it emerged. Peter, you rejected it forcefully. Let's start with you, Trace. Why did you decide to embrace this new technology?
So I came from it with a worldview of monetary sovereignty.
More
My blog
buzzwords.
was called Run to Gold, launched in January of 2008. And so when I came across Bitcoin, I could see that this limited amountness that it had, along with its ability to be portable over communication channels, could be very disruptive. And so...
Yet it has not disrupted anything.
That's one of the main reasons I started talking about it.
And Peter, why did you decide to reject it? And when? You've known about it since it was $1.
Well, first of all, some of us are advocating for sound money, and some of us just think they're advocating for sound money.
Which I love that he's not going to let him get away with anything.
But, actually, before I answer your question, because a lot of people are even saying, why is Peter Schiff even at a Bitcoin conference?
Exactly.
Right? And so I got to tell you something, because I know this, I learned this from personal experience at this event, right? And this is not something I'm proud of, right? But this is a fact. Based on what I've been told by countless people who have asked me to pose for selfies with them, I am probably responsible for more people owning Bitcoin than any other person at this conference. And every time I tell you guys not to buy Bitcoin, you buy more. So you can thank me.
You're the
or you can
inverse.
blame me. But if you want to know the reason that I didn't buy Bitcoin when I first learned about it, and it wasn't Max Kaiser, he likes to credit, he wasn't Max Kaiser who told me about it. It was people at my Senate campaign in 2010 who were working with me because some people were donating Bitcoin in 2010. I don't know what the hell happened to that Bitcoin because I've tried to find it. And so people in my campaign said, Pete, why don't you buy some of this Bitcoin? Like, what the hell's that? And they explained it to me. And I actually thought about buying it. Like, you know, I mean, it was, I don't know if it was $1, less than $1 more. I can't remember exactly. But the main reason I didn't just take a punt on it, I thought about throwing 10 grand in or 50 grand. I don't know. I was going to buy some. And I remember asking the guy, told me, well, what's to stop somebody else from coming up with another one? I mean, can you have another cryptocurrency or is it just Bitcoin? Well, I said, no. I mean, you could just make another one and have another name and it can have the same properties. So in other words, there's an unlimited number of cryptos that can be created. So it's not really that unique. It's just the first one. And they can make more. And they said, yeah, they can make more. And that was kind of what I said, well, then what, you know.
Actually, it wasn't even the first one. eCash was the first cryptocurrency. So it came out long before Bitcoin, and its creators were arrested for money laundering.
What do I, you know, why buy it? And, you know, and obviously, you know, went way up. And the next time I thought about buying it was after it went up to 1,000, and it came down 300, 400. It was there for a couple of years. And some people I knew, smart people, investors, were buying it. And I was like, what are you buying this crap for? And I thought, you know, but if they're buying it, maybe more fools will buy it. Maybe I should just buy some for the hell of it. And my biggest mental problem was I couldn't pay $400 for something that I didn't want to buy at $4.
Right. Good point.
And so, you know, but I just never could have imagined today, all of these people, right? Because I was telling people not to buy Bitcoin before most of you even knew what it was. And I never could have imagined that so many people would find so much value in nothing.
This is a good point. And, you know, everybody just says number went up, number went up, number went up. But the truth is what he said is true. If you don't believe it has value at $4, then why would you pay $400 for it? I mean, there's a kind of an ethical, consistent mental thing there. Just because it goes up doesn't mean it's going to always go up. And one of the things that's left out of all of these conversations is the fact that the number went up because it was manipulated by private exchanges that had no accountability, no transparency, and no oversight. So the number, that the value that Bitcoin is trading at is it's a fabricated figure. Now, you may say, well, if I've got Bitcoin, I could sell at that. Maybe, maybe not. It depends on how much Bitcoin you have. We really don't know how much liquidity there is in the market, and at any point it could collapse. This is not like traditional finance where you have the FDIC or the SEC looking over people's business and can catch things before they completely collapsed. And there's nothing like that. There's no checks and balances in the world of crypto. We have no idea how much liquidity Coinbase or Kraken or Bitfinex or Binance actually have. And it could be, you know, one whale could theoretically wipe out the liquidity pool and cause it to collapse, which is basically what happened with FTX. They ran out of liquidity. They were trying to move it around from exchange to exchange because these exchanges all collude with each other because they need to, because the price is manipulated based on arbitrage bots that's been proven by peer-reviewed studies, and all of these stable coins that are not really stable because the reserves have never been audited. So we really don't know how much liquidity is backed up by Tether. And Tether's liquidity, Tether supposedly controls, not anybody else. So it's a huge house of cards, and I totally understand. But some people just cling to the, well, it says it's worth 100K now. Maybe, maybe not. You just really don't know. I know that sounds absurd, but it really is the truth. You know, Bernie Madoff, all of his clients thought that they had a certain amount of money in their accounts, and if one of them tried to cash out, it might have worked. But if a certain number of them tried to cash out, the whole scheme would have collapsed and it would have been exposed as being insolvent. And that's what we just don't know about the Bitcoin market, which is basically why Peter didn't buy then, why he didn't buy later, why I'm not buying either.
Trace, why don't you educate Peter in the eloquent way that you speak about why Bitcoin is so special? Even though we have so many other cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin is unique and stands out and has value, even though it's digital.
She's talking down to him.
Value, it's all subjective value theory. So
again, now, so here's the Austrian economics guy coming in. 1 minute we're talking about particular things in the material realm, and now he pivots into the realm of philosophy, Austrian philosophy, which I believe, I think it's Austrian economics, which suggests that empirical data is not really relevant and that all value is subjective, which is bullshit. That they've redefined what intrinsic value means just so that they can pretend Bitcoin is not any different from other forms of value. It's all just a bunch of bullshit. And here he goes with his bullshit.
Things have value because the individuals value them, and it's not on us to put on someone else why they value something.
That's called extrinsic value. That's not intrinsic value. Intrinsic value has value whether you believe in it or not. For example, water has intrinsic value. If you don't like water, it doesn't matter. You still need it to survive. Intrinsically, it's valuable, whether or not you like it, whether or not it's popular. Bottled water has some intrinsic value because it's water's intrinsic value, but it can also have an extrinsic value if you do enough advertising. Those are two different types of value. He wants to pretend that both are subjective, and that is objectively wrong. But he's going to bounce back and forth between the real world and this philosophical realm that he's in.
I ran into a lot of these similar issues because when I first started talking about Bitcoin, I targeted the Goldbugs and the libertarians. The Goldbugs because they should know what sound money is, and the libertarians because they're just kind of crazy.
They're crazy.
And it would be great if Bitcoin were successful. It would be great for these two particular demographics to have a lot of wealth. And so, I had emails with Lou Rockwell about having LouRockwell.com accept Bitcoin, and encountered resistance in 2012 to that. One of the chief Goldbugs.
It's interesting that these crypto people always do that. They always bring up these anecdotes where they were trying to talk people into crypto a long time ago, and if they had taken their advice, they would be in the profit now. What they're leaving out is they were probably also hawking all kinds of other things that didn't pan out that they're no longer going to mention. They were probably hyping up Juicero and, WorldCom, Enron. Who knows? But he's certainly not going to talk about the other things that he said was going to go places that never went anywhere. This is confirmation bias.
James Turk, who founded Gold Money, and I was actually an investor in Gold Money before I got involved in Bitcoin, like 2007. James Turk, one of his main hangups was that Bitcoin was not tangible. And that's, I suppose, a difficult issue to kind of attack, right? And so what I did is I went into because ideas can only be overcome by other ideas. You have to be able to, lay out your argument and persuade somebody if they're going to freely value something. And we have to really understand these things in order to be a true hodler. You've got to have conviction. And that conviction comes because of
a true hodler.
The understanding that you have in your mind about it and what you desire in your heart to do with it.
See, that sounds more like a religious culty talk.
I wrote this article about why Bitcoin is tangible. And the reason it's tangible is because the word tangible comes from...
Again, he's moving from the philosophical realm into the material realm, redefining what words actually mean. He's got his own definition of tangible now.
Tangent, which is a math term, means to kiss. And further down in the etymology is that it has to do with reality. And so I distinguished between tangibility and corporeality. Corporeality being the physicality, but tangibility being something that's based in reality, not a hallucination. And so...
Even so, how would Bitcoin be anything other than a hallucination? I don't get that. I think he's just now getting bogged down in semantics.
Mathematics, for example, is tangible but not corporeal. And in Bitcoin's case, we have special numbers which act as these private keys to move and transfer.
So is mathematics tangible? I just think this is a weird philosophical argument where unless you're high as fuck, this really doesn't have any relevance to the discussion.
With the Bitcoins, just like we have special atoms that act with gold. And so, we have very similar analogies between the two, and we have to have a little bit more abstract thinking on these ideas
but
of
atoms
Austrian
materially
economics with
exist.
subjective value theory and then number theory and monetary theory to get to where we're going with Bitcoin. But it's sound. Why? Because it's limited in its internal characteristics. Just like gold with atoms, it's limited by math and numbers and thermodynamics, and therefore it's not limited in amount by extrinsic characteristics like counterfeiting laws.
That's bullshit. So I guess he's implying that Bitcoin's scarcity is a finite kind of thing, like gold's atomic makeup is a finite thing, but that's bullshit. You can't make more gold by just with the gold that you have, but you can make more Bitcoin by simply changing a configuration item in the code and having it change the maximum amount. So I don't think his comparison is fair.
So Peter, Bitcoin is math, so do you not believe in math?
No, I believe in math. I just don't believe that Bitcoin has any value because you solve a mathematical equation to create one. Just like I don't think Bitcoin is energy just because you waste energy to make one.
Very good point. I don't know if you noticed, but his microphone was turned down and it got turned back up as he started speaking. So they probably turned his microphone down so he can't interrupt anybody. They don't want him laughing or scoffing or something. And of course, Natalie's little gotcha question, do you not believe in math? That's typical disingenuous kind of engagement.
I disagree with what Trey said about Bitcoin not being intangible. It is intangible, but that's not why it doesn't have value. Intangible assets can be very valuable. And my problem with Bitcoin isn't the fact that it's not a tangible asset. It's because you can't really do anything with it. It doesn't have any real use. The only thing I can do with my Bitcoin is I can give it to somebody else. I can sell it to somebody, I can gift it to somebody, but what are they going to do with it? They can turn around and give it to somebody else or sell it to somebody else. But why does somebody want Bitcoin? Because they think that they're going to be able to turn around and sell it to somebody else at a higher price. And why does that person want it? Because he has the same expectation that he'll be able to sell it at a higher price. So everybody buys Bitcoin simply because they think that someone else will pay more.
Excellent point. That is just common sense. He didn't need to dip into the realm of philosophy and redefine what any words meant. He didn't need to talk to fill people's heads with a bunch of techno babble. He described Bitcoin in a nutshell very, very simply. The only reason why anybody would want it is so that they can flip it to somebody else. And the only way they see a return is by selling it for more than what they paid for. So if you do the math, if you believe in math, then that's a mathematically unsustainable relationship because eventually you will run out of people to sell it to and you will run out of money available for people to pay higher and higher prices. Now, just because our market is so large, we can't easily visualize exactly when we might run out of those greater fools or money, doesn't mean that it's still just completely unsustainable. And for that reason alone, common sense says you should try to avoid it. Obviously, if you want to gamble, if you want to try to get in on the scheme, and you think it's got a little bit longer to go before it collapses, you might be able to make some money. But ultimately, it's not an honorable way of creating wealth because, as Peter says, Bitcoin doesn't do anything. It doesn't produce anything. At least if you buy stock in like a company like Pfizer, you can see a return either from selling the stock or from Pfizer's dividends. But also Pfizer is out there creating things that help people, vaccines, things that make your dick last longer. But that's all valuable to different groups of people. It provides a useful service. And Bitcoin doesn't do any of that. So taking any capital that could be directed towards something that actually does something useful for society, like cure diseases, seems like not the best use of your capital.
And so it's just a giant, literally a blockchain letter. It's built on the same foundation as a pyramid scheme. And now you've got all these Bitcoin treasury companies now that are basically, pyramiding the Ponzi's. And everybody is buying this with the expectations that they're going to get rich. And a lot of people have gotten rich if they bought it early enough. But J.D. Vance was here this morning talking about all the wealth that has been created by Bitcoin and crypto. No wealth has been created. Right. I don't care how many of these coins are in existence. They're not wealth. They're not value. But a lot of wealth has been transferred. A lot of people who bought or created these tokens and who sold them got wealthy because the wealth of the buyer was transferred to the seller. So it's like we're in Vegas. This is a gigantic casino, right? And the casinos, you have winners and losers, but then you have the house that rakes everything. But some people make money because other people lose money. That's how crypto works.
And again, simple explanation that just completely nails the dynamic of the crypto's return on investment. No need for technical jargon, no need to tell anybody they don't understand, no need to make somebody sit behind some kind of video that explains something about the gold standard and what happened in 1971. No need to run anybody through a primer on what actual money is. None of that bullshit that crypto people subject everybody else to in order to claim that you don't understand. You got to listen to this. You got to watch this. No, it can be explained very simply. This abstraction you guys think has value doesn't produce anything useful for society, and anybody who is holding crypto has transferred their wealth to somebody who sold it. Very, very simple. Now, of course, how are the rest of these people going to react to him just laying down something that's so definitively, just condemning of the entire industry? Let's see.
People are going to make money who get in early, but those gains are going to be offset by the losses of all the people that get in late. Now, the question is, and you can look around this room and see all the people here and all the money that's been spent on all these booths and ask yourself, am I early or am I late? Right? Because if you're late, you're the bag holder. And if you really think that you're going to come to this conference and have 300,000 people here one day, I've never been to a conference this big. The biggest gold conference I go to maybe has 600-700 people.
Exactly.
But when I went,
oh yeah, she owned him, right?
After this conference is over, when you go home, go on YouTube and look up Peter Schiff Mortgage Bankers, because I came to the Western Regional Mortgage Bankers convention at the Mirage when that used to be a big hotel back then in 2006, and I came there right under the same dynamic I'm coming here. I came there to tell a bunch of people whose livelihood depended on mortgage finance that the housing bubble was going to pop and that mortgages were going to collapse and that they were all going to be out of work. And I remember telling them that, in a couple of years, they'll be able to have the whole conference in just one hotel room, because I knew it was a bubble. And I came there and I made a deal with the company. I said, I will come to your conference with for one reason. You got to give me a room to tell people about the hedge fund that I just started to short the subprime market, because I think that people who are in the mortgage market should put a little bit of the money on the don't pass side, because I think they should hedge their careers and because I have a great investment for them to bet that subprime collapses.
Okay, you called out the housing bubble. We know that. We're calling.
So I love that she's just dismissed it. Okay, you recognize the housing market was a complete disaster before anybody else did, but this is different. But that doesn't mean we should listen to you now. And they're just going to proceed to ignore the entire point that he made about how Bitcoin produces nothing valuable and that its ROI thing is completely unsustainable. She's just going to just gloss over it.
Out the sovereign debt bubble, the fiat bubble, right? Nothing has destroyed. No, hold on. Nothing has destroyed wealth for the majority more than fiat.
That's a completely false statement. Nothing has destroyed wealth for the majority of people than fiat. That is a completely false, unsubstantiated statement. What's destroyed people's wealth is a very complicated thing involving corporate greed and consolidation and lack of regulations and the destruction of unions. But basically, the rich and their corporations are getting richer and the rest of everybody else is getting the shaft. That has nothing to do with the monetary system. If you go outside and you pay more for something, chances are it can be more directly tied towards corporate greed, the price of oil, war, supply chain issues than it can what type of money you're using. There's not only is there no causation, there's not even any legitimate correlation between the monetary system and the inflation that most of us are feeling. And of course, like everything in these panels, they're not going to back anything they're saying with any actual evidence.
Okay, and I personally believe that the reason we have fiat is because of gold's fatal flaw, because it is physical, because it requires papering over and creating liabilities. So how do you answer for that flaw in a digital economy?
Gold doesn't have a flaw. Humans have flaws. And
good point.
What gives fiat currency value is belief. Fiat currency ultimately has value, not necessarily because the sovereign issues it and demands that taxes be paid in it, but ultimately what gives a fiat currency value, as opposed to a real currency, a legitimate currency that derives its value from the money that backs it up. The money would be gold.
So here's where I disagree with him, but I see the point that he's making because he's a gold guy, right? So he's going to differentiate between fiat currency backed by gold and regular fiat currency. And he's not necessarily wrong, but this is predicated on you believing that gold is a good store of value. And not everybody believes that. But he's also glossing over the fact that what gives fiat doesn't have any intrinsic value, whether it's backed by gold or not. Fiat is fiat until even if you have fiat that's gold backed, it has no intrinsic value until you can actually trade that fiat for physical gold. And then you have something that's of intrinsic value. So they both have arguably subjective value. But the difference is in both cases, whether you've got fiat that's gold backed or fiat that's not, what gives it value is its extrinsic value, but this type of extrinsic value it has is very significant. It is mandated for all debts, public and private, by the community you live in. So it's the standard measure. It has tremendous utility. You can pay your bills in it. You can buy your groceries. You can pay your rent in it. You can put gas in your car. That gives it value via utility. It's extrinsic value, but it has great utility in society, whereas Bitcoin has neither. It has no intrinsic value. It has no utility in society. He's kind of noting the difference between gold-backed fiat and regular fiat, which is kind of irrelevant in today's context.
And then you would have currency that's redeemable in gold. Fiat currency has value because people believe in it, because people have faith in it.
Because the state mandates it.
And that is the only reason that Bitcoin has value. Bitcoin is fiat digital currency. Just because it's not issued by a government doesn't change the nature of what it is. But if you like blockchain, there is nothing that stops you from tokenizing gold, putting it on a blockchain,
so here he goes with
and
this crap.
Using it as a medium of exchange and as a unit of account. It is a great store of value, which Bitcoin can never be because you can't store what you don't have.
So I disagree with him on this.
But if you want to use tokenized gold, it is faster and cheaper than Bitcoin. So I can pay and get paid. I can send and receive money instantly around the world with tokenized gold. You don't have to move the gold. You just have to move the ownership of the gold.
All right, Trace, you believe in both gold and Bitcoin. Can you talk to me a little bit about this? Because there is a reason why we ended up with fiat, and you have been a student of the Constitution, which is supposed to define what money is. It's not supposed to be these pieces of paper that represent fake promises. So tell us how we even got here.
So this is another misleading thing that she's claiming, that fiat money is a violation of the Constitution. But that's not technically true, because the Constitution also gives Congress the ability to expand upon the laws that are in the Constitution. Obviously, the Constitution is a finite document that rarely is updated itself except via the Bill of Rights. But there are other laws that the Constitution allows other branches of government to be able to pass. And so if Congress dictates that this new law that says dollar bills are legal tender, that's not a violation of the Constitution. It's an extension of the Constitution, because the Constitution gives Congress the power to create laws. Congress adds some additional laws. There's no conflict there, unless the Constitution says Congress cannot make any laws relating to money, which I don't think it says that.
And why you actually believe in both gold and Bitcoin.
And if it
right
does,
now.
correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so as we talked about with the precious numbers and the precious atoms, the result is a monetary good that is equity-based and nobody's liability. So Bitcoin and gold are identical in that sense.
No, they're not.
Peter.
Atoms are real material things. Numbers are abstractions.
There's no issuing authority there's no Bitcoin company that issued a Bitcoin. There's no, it's a product of nature now because of the pure
No, it's a product of code being run by a certain number of people.
I don't understand that part of the argument. But when we go back and look at our history, we had fractional reserve banking going on. It crashed, and they put Isaac Newton in as master of the mint to fix it in 1696, and he came up with the gold standard. And then we had these gold being left with the goldsmiths. They'd leave gold certificates. Those would circulate. So now we had money being the gold, then we had money substitutes being the gold certificates. Now, it was Roosevelt with Executive Order 6102, and then Nixon with closing the gold window that moved us away from these gold certificates.
And also what happened during that time was we had fewer and fewer major financial calamities. When we were on a gold standard, we had a lot more problems due to the liquidity squeeze that we suffered. So he's going to talk about one aspect of why we moved to the gold standard, but he's not going to really go into the details of why we went away from it. He's just going to note that we went away from it, and now now your eggs and your milk cost too much. Therefore, he's going to draw this very sketchy line from the price of eggs to leaving the gold standard, which there's no real causation there.
To just fiat currency illusions that are like IOU nothings. I mean, they're just there's no realness to them at all, or even pretended realness. And
except that I can pay my rent, taxes, everything with it. That's pretty real.
Monetary system to where we are today, where we are using this unconstitutional fiat currency.
I don't think that's true.
The federal government has no express power to make anything legal tender. The state governments can make things legal tender, but they're restricted.
Hold on. They have no express power to make anything legal tender. I want to see the citation for that. He's saying the Constitution doesn't necessarily say Congress can make legal tender, but does it say they can't? Because that would be more powerful. If the Constitution said this is the monetary system and Congress cannot do anything to modify it, he might be right. So I think they're twisting this around the other way. If the Constitution doesn't say Congress can't create new monetary systems, it's unconstitutional. That's not correct.
By the U.S. Constitution under Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1, that they can only make gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. And so we have an unconstitutional monetary system, and it's based on this illusion that's just like a colored piece of paper that's...
Okay, I'm not a big expert on the Constitution. So I don't know if that's completely true, if it says they can only make certain kinds of coins or whatever. But even if that's true, there's got to be plenty of other loopholes where the government can create certificates and contracts and other kinds of debt obligations. I mean, those things have been going on all the while. They weren't, there was other ways of transferring and representing value than gold and silver coinage. And I'm pretty sure that predates the time of the Constitution, and I don't think the Constitution excluded it. So I'm not quite sure that this anti-constitutional argument holds water. But if you know more about this, please leave a comment, because I certainly would like to know more. And if I'm wrong or there's some important stuff that people need to know, leave a message and we'll return to that.
Printed, and even more so just digits in a database. that are not limited in amount by any intrinsic characteristics like Bitcoin and gold are.
But doesn't Bitcoin fix for exactly what caused the issue in the first place? The
No.
fact that you can't send or verify gold very easily, especially when you're talking about a global interconnected world?
Yeah, so I did an interview with Saifedean years ago, and we talked about, I brought up this issue of the cost to run a gold full node. You know, you have to have a refinery, you got to melt down the gold, you got to recast it. That's a very costly process. The Bitcoin network does all of that for
Again,
15
comparing
cents.
Bitcoin to gold is just an invalidating
and because
thing.
of the nature of the Bitcoin network and the triple entry
Gold has
bookkeeping that we
intrinsic
have with
value, Bitcoin doesn't.
It's
Bitcoin is an
acting as
abstraction,
both
gold
the
is not.
asset and the rails that we
So it's just a
that we
completely
transfer
improper
with
comparison.
at the same time. We look back over our history. You know, they developed the telegraph, and then we started sending money over the wires. That's where wire transfer came from. So the money's always kind of had this dual purpose of transferring value through time, but also transferring through the distance vector. And usually you've had two different instruments that do that: gold and silver, salt and cows. Humanity's come up with all different types of things, and Nick Szabo has a lot of writing on this topic. But this is.
You were never transferring money over the wires. You were basically using the wires to agree to a contract, an agreement, a transfer of debt for services. And any other digital transfer is going to involve something similar, where you're entering some kind of an agreement where I agree to do this and you agree to do that. It's not actual money that's transferring.
We're now living with a new innovation, and that innovation is what Satoshi solved. He solved the double spin problem.
No.
And
Again, there's another bullshit lie. Satoshi didn't solve the double spend problem. Number one, Satoshi created the double spend problem by decentralizing his database. Traditional databases do not have a double spend problem because they lock their files when the transaction is in use so that another transaction cannot come in and spend money that's involved in a single transaction, because they're extremely efficient and they handle transactions in the order that they come. So the double spend problem does not exist in traditional finance anywhere because they use more efficient databases. The double spend problem was created by blockchain when you created a database that nobody was in charge of, that theoretically could be manipulated by more than one party simultaneously. So you had to come up with some kind of scheme to decide which transaction gets priority over the other transaction. And it doesn't solve the problem. It basically just says whoever controls the most resources on the network gets to pick whose transaction gets settled first. It doesn't solve the problem. To solve the problem would be like whichever transaction comes first is the one that gets it. But you can't have that when you have multiple systems and nobody knows what the exact time is of anything. Again, it's just a convoluted system. This is a complete lie. The problem is not solved. It's just whoever controls the mining for that block gets to determine who it is. And that's arbitrary based on, luck of guessing the number and picking the right transactions in the next block that you're going to be codifying. It's not a rational, thoughtful way to solve the problem at all. It's just a kind of, I'm going to roll a dice, and if it comes up this way, you get to be the first transaction. If it comes up that way, the other guy gets to be the first transaction. That's not really solving a problem, is it?
So what do we get to do with that? And we're experimenting with it now.
Comments, Peter?
Well, first of all, you said that both gold and Bitcoin have intrinsic value, and that's not the case. Bitcoin doesn't have any intrinsic value. That's always been my problem with it. One is that all you can do is you can send it to somebody else, whereas gold is money because it's the most liquid commodity. Gold was a valuable commodity before we discovered that we could use it as money. But gold is used in industry, not just jewelry. That's probably 50% of the use. But gold is used in aerospace. It's used in computer business.
In all electronics.
It's used in
almost.
medicine. It's used in dentistry. It's the most valuable, the most useful metal that we have. And what's special about it is that it doesn't lose those properties over time.
I don't know if I would say gold is the most useful metal. I would say steel and iron are more useful. If all the gold disappeared, we could probably still function. Maybe some of our electronics would have problems because of the corrosion resistance that we get from gold. But if iron was gone, I think we wouldn't have bridges, a lot of bridges. We wouldn't have a lot of stuff. Even cement uses iron rebar inside of it for structural integrity. So I wouldn't say it's the most useful metal. I think he's wrong there. But correct, if you guys disagree, let me know.
In 1,000 years, the gold that you have today will be just as useful as it is now. It doesn't rot. It doesn't decay. And so it's real. And yes, constitutionally, you're correct. I mean, gold is supposed to be money. It's the only thing that the states can make legal tender. The federal government has no constitutional authority to make anything legal tender. All the government can do, the federal government, is coin gold and silver. That's all it can do. So we have an unconstitutional system. We went off the gold standard. The dollar used to be defined.
I would love to know more about how accurate that really is.
The dollar was defined as a weight in gold. And before we had even the Federal Reserve, we had private banks that issued currency backed by gold, by real money, dollars on demand. And I've got no problem, if the people in this room, want to waste their money buying Bitcoin, fine, it's a free country. But where I do have a problem is when you bribe the politicians to buy Bitcoin with my money. Because I don't want to buy Bitcoin, and I don't think the U.S. government should be buying Bitcoin.
I agree.
And I don't think any of the state governments should be buying Bitcoin. It's kind of ironic that something that was created, to be anti-government is now completely dependent on government. I don't think we'd have Bitcoin over 100,000 right now if it wasn't for the election of Donald Trump and what's going on with the government to try to misdirect resources into Bitcoin, into crypto, and now all these companies like Strategy and other copycat companies that are levering up and issuing stock and borrowing money to accumulate Bitcoin, to the exclusion of other more valuable things. I mean, resources that are wasted on crypto are resources we can't use to build factories.
Right.
We can't use those resources to create things that we actually need. And so now we have to run larger trade deficits to import more stuff that they're making in China because we're wasting our time coming up with fart coin.
I love it. Again, you'll notice that he is not hiding behind abstractions and philosophical generalizations. He's not redefining what words mean. He's talking in plain, straightforward language that anybody can understand. He's explaining specifically how and why Bitcoin doesn't produce anything useful for society. He's not telling you don't understand, as an excuse for why y'all disagree. He's talking in very plain English, and I think it's almost like, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. It's like there's two different groups of people here that are on completely different planes of existence. And these people just cognitively refuse to acknowledge the simple truths that he's stating.
And we're not creating things that people really need.
Now, Peter, the free market is telling you something. There are 30,000 people here. The White House has embraced Bitcoin.
Again, so this is called the argument from popularity. It's a logical fallacy. She didn't address his core concern that Bitcoin produces nothing, right? Good for society. Instead, her counter argument is there's 30,000 people here. Are you calling these 30,000 people dingbats and idiots? Hey, the president agrees with us. Are you saying the president is wrong? It's a really disingenuous response.
You have your own strategic Bitcoin reserve, which, by the way, who is sending Peter Bitcoin? Please stop.
No.
I mean, when are you going to say, okay, the market may be right, this is an emergent phenomenon, and it should be the market that decides, and maybe you're on the wrong side of that?
No, I mean, look, just because a lot of people believe something, that doesn't mean that I'm going to give in to the peer pressure to believe it too. But, you think that the whole world is in on Bitcoin. Look, I can tell you, when I walk down the streets of a busy city, maybe one person will recognize me during the day, right? Pretty much everybody in this room knows who I am. And so most people don't own Bitcoin, because if they did, everybody would recognize me when I'm walking down the street. But they don't, right? So you get into an echo chamber, and the people who like Bitcoin surround themselves with other people who like Bitcoin, and they all reinforce the same delusion. And something like 50% of the people in the world in the world that own Bitcoin live in America, right? Which is a pretty big number, and nothing we should be proud of as Americans. But so you get in a group, and it reinforces this mass delusion that everybody has. And to me, it's like a giant cult, and you're worshiping, this God, Satoshi Nakamoto is the Lord, and everybody just believes, and I'm going to buy Bitcoin, and I'm never going to sell it. Never sell your Bitcoin. Yeah, you know who got you to never sell your Bitcoin? The whales that are selling you their Bitcoin. Or where do you think all the Bitcoin is coming from that everybody is buying? It's the people who bought it a long time ago that are laughing all the way to the bank as they're selling you their worthless tokens.
Well, actually, Wall Street is buying from us. We got it before them, so that's pretty great. Trace, I'd love for you to respond to Peter before we wrap up.
Yeah. Well, I'm not selling anybody anything.
That is the creepiest laugh
I've
ever.
been on the scarcest asset on the planet that has liquidity with 110 stock to flow. Peter did say that I had said that Bitcoin has
No, here comes the technobabble, right? 110 stock to flow. I mean, what does that mean? I don't know. But instead of talking in plain English, he's going to go off into Never Never Land.
Intrinsic value. That's not what I said. I said it was limited by its intrinsic characteristics. Nothing has intrinsic value.
That's bullshit.
We, as humans, subscribe value to things through subjective value theory. And so that's an important distinction.
That's his philosophy.
And then it gets to our next point about entrepreneurship. One of the great things about entrepreneurship is that the entrepreneur is able to take time, labor, capital, combine it with their vision, and produce a good for the market. And the entrepreneurs that are successful, they have profits. And the entrepreneurs that have losses are those that are unsuccessful.
What does this have to do with anything?
What he did is he created a new monetary good as an entrepreneur and introduced it into the market.
And where's the profit from it? Where's the value that it's creating?
Have honed in on it and decided, I want some of that.
Oh,
and
subjective
now it's
value.
A Schelling point, and it's become the most liquid, high stock to flow asset on the planet.
The most liquid, high stock to flow asset on the planet. What the fuck does that even mean? Why do you have to use these weird terms that you've pulled out of your ass that nobody else understands? This is what, I guess it's the whole dazzle them with bullshit argument where, Peter just said, what does it create? What does it create? And your response is, well, value is all subjective, dude. And like entrepreneurs create things that give them value. And since value is subjective, if I think what Satoshi did is valuable to me, then it's intrinsically valuable, man. I mean, that's this weird.
And, we're only 16 years into this.
Only?
I have some gold UTXOs, some gold coins that are 25. I've had them for 25 years. There's some institutions that have had gold UTXOs for millennia. Where are we going to be in another 16 years?
Now they're calling gold coins UTXOs, which is a reference to Bitcoin's unspent transaction outputs, which is basically an abstraction. Coins are actual coins. An address in Bitcoin's blockchain, which they call a UTXO, which is a piece of data in the Bitcoin blockchain that says this transaction ended in this person's wallet, therefore the tokens are in that wallet. That's an abstraction. Again, disingenuous and inappropriate to compare an actual tangible item with an abstraction.
And another 16 years after that, and then another 160 years after that. And Bitcoin is just going to continue to crank that stock to flow higher. It's going to get scarcer, and
no guarantee of that whatsoever.
Putting their savings and their retained earnings into it because it treats that capital well, because it has this high stock to flow, a stock to flow that's now twice gold's, but it'll eventually be even higher.
Again, what the fuck is stock to flow?
It's a superior monetary good in many of those ways.
That's bullshit.
An emergent bottom-up phenomenon.
An emergent bottom-up phenomenon. Another more weird technobabble. What does an emergent bottom-up phenomenon mean? If I went to the bank and I said, what services do you provide? Well, we've got an emergent bottom-up phenomenon. I'd be like, what the hell is that? If I go to the grocery store and I want to get some food and I see a bin that says emergent bottom-up phenomenons and there's nothing in there, I don't know what the fuck I'm buying.
We are out of time, unfortunately, Peter. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
And
you're not
what
sorry.
I will leave you with, Peter, this is just a lesson from my heart to yours, because I do really appreciate your work
No,
and
she
your
doesn't.
sound money leadership. You can be for something without being against something. You can be for gold without being against Bitcoin. We are all for Bitcoin. I'm not against you, Peter. And I know that someday you will be on stage when Bitcoin's $1 million and maybe you'll finally get in. Thank you so much.
Yeah, get the last word. Blah, blah, blah. You're going to be wrong. Bitcoin's going to be $1 million. This is that same kind of bullshit fucking intimidation FOMO crap that they dump on people. But watch, Peter doesn't let him get away with it. He nails her.
Natalie, I do think that I think Bitcoin is doing a lot of harm, so that's why I'm against it.
Yeah. Again. And look, she just walks off, leaves him. There you have it. There you fucking have it. But I will give him credit for actually putting Peter Schiff on and letting him kind of talk some sense into these people. And you could see it went in one ear and out the other. I'm notorious for giving people a chance to engage me and debate with me. And time again, it's the same situation where I talk in plain common sense language, and then when I get them into a corner, they switch from the material realm into the realm of philosophy and start saying, well, what is all value? There's an entire debate I did with another crypto bro that's been recorded that I haven't released because it's the same exact bullshit. And I almost feel like it's just the guy wants me to release it, and I guess I probably will release it, but it went nowhere. It was completely pointless. You cannot reason with these people. It's like a religious cult. And, that was her equivalent of, I'll pray for you, Peter. I'll pray for you, Peter. You'll be on the altar of Judgment Day, and Bitcoin is going to be there, and you'll buy it then. That kind of crap. Stay tuned for my truth mix. It's coming. It's going to be really good. I'm spending a lot more time trying to make it even more fun and entertaining than last time. So stay tuned for that. Once again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening, and be sure to subscribe to both the YouTube channel as well as our podcast, which are on all the major platforms: iTunes, Amazon Music, Spotify. Just search for ioRadio, and you should be able to find it. Or you go to the website, ioRadio.org. You'll find links to all of the podcast platforms and everything like that. And be sure to visit the YouTube channel. It's YouTube/American Scream Video. You can find a link to that at our main site, which is ioRadio.org, or the site for my documentary, which is called Blockchain Innovation or Illusion. That's at blockchainii.com. And again, thanks very much for your support. And if you would like to appear on the show, or you want to debate, or you want to discuss anything, email Adam at ioRadio.org.